My name is Tasneem Jamal. I am the communications officer at Project Ploughshares, and I will be emceeing the evening. So I will introduce these three. They will give some remarks on the subject for tonight, which is navigating or making sense of a fractured world in this post-Trump election win era that we're about to embark on. First, we're going to start with our executive director, Cesar Jaramillo, who's going to say a few words, and then after that, I'll do an introduction individually, a fairly short one of everyone. Okay, so Cesar, I will hand it off to you.
Sure.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tasneem, and thank you so much for everybody for being here. People in the back, there are still some seats in the front, so I would invite you all to find a seat if you can and be comfortable for the evening. So we have a very, timely, I might say, panel conversation coming up with my fabulous colleagues at Project Ploughshares that we hope will be of interest to you. But before we get there, I wanted to just share a few reflections about the something that's part of the theme of the evening, which is a fractured world or a troubled world, and any variation of that. I would like to start, however, by thanking each of you for being here. I mean, it's busy times. This is an interesting time of the day, and we really are grateful for your time. We don't take it for granted, and we're really appreciative for your time, your attention, your presence, your support. Many of you are supporters of Project Ploughshares, and as Tasneem said, that is the primary way in which we sustain our work. We're not a big organization. We don't receive major government grants. Our primary source of funding really is small donors from across Canada, and we are so tremendously grateful. That is something that we also do not take for granted. We work every day, my colleagues and myself, administrative staff, research staff, to earn that support. To earn, and it's not a one-time thing, it's a continuous process where we really strive to inspire you enough confidence that you will support our work financially. And the inescapable reality is that we do need your support. I mean, that is how we work, that is how we sustain the mission of Project Ploughshares. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you really on behalf of everyone at Project Ploughshares, to invite you to support us if you are not already supporting us, and every bit counts. Really, in some ways, the amount is immaterial. In others, it's quite material. But in some ways, it's immaterial. It really is the willingness to support this type of work. And hopefully, throughout the panel and some of the remarks that I'll give in a minute, you will find the sense of purpose that each of us finds through our work at Project Ploughshares. Now, back to the theme of the evening. We will be focusing a little bit, not exclusively, on the electoral results in the United States and the Trump administration and some of the implications related to that. But before we get there, I want to speak a little bit, really, about the notion of a fractured world, because that's really been on my mind quite a bit and on the minds of my friends and colleagues at Project Ploughshares. And I've been reflecting quite a bit lately about how to stay optimistic in the midst of what many experts are calling now the poly crisis. We are witnessing multiple, overlapping, mutually reinforcing global security crisis in the world in a way that is really quite concerning. This is not a call for despair. This is not a call for losing optimism, but it really is a call for being aware of the stakes and the grave and fragile security situation that we find ourselves in. Only since last year, according to some estimates, more than 150,000 people have been killed in Sudan. 150,000 people. That's the whole population of Waterloo, roughly, give or take. We would all be dead. 150,000 people. And that barely makes the news. By now, more than 2% of the population in Gaza has been killed. If that were in Canada, that would be more than 800,000 people dead. We would surely know somebody or be related to somebody or be dead ourselves. More than 800,000 if it were in Canada. If it was in the United States, be more than 6.5 million people killed within the last year. And the context under which this is happening is also concerning. We are witnessing the crumbling of norms that we held dear, of norms that we thought were already settled matters, hard-won victories, including, of course, the Geneva Conventions and the resulting international humanitarian law. And the understanding was quite simple. You don't need to understand every little article of the law, but the basic assumption was simple. Even in times of war, there are basic norms. Even in times of war, there are norms. You don't cross certain lines. Well, we're witnessing these very norms crumble before our eyes, in real time, in plain sight. And I am concerned not just about the fact that the norms are being broken, but about the response of the international community. In the case of Gaza, it has ranged from silence to timidity to complicity. And we're seeing these norms being eroded by the terrorists that we know to be terrorists, and by states that, despite their barbarism, claim to be on the side of civilization. And we still meet that with silence or timidity or complicity. In Ukraine, we're the closest we have ever been to a nuclear weapons detonation. The closest we have ever been. We held a high-level meeting in Ottawa just a few days. Some of you may have been there. And we titled the conference Times of Unprecedented Risk. And some thought went into that title. We didn't just throw the word unprecedented. And we considered the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we considered the height of the Cold War. And we still, very conscientiously, called it Times of Unprecedented Risk. 2 days ago, the Biden administration authorized the transfer of anti-personnel mines to Ukraine. Is anyone familiar with the Ottawa Treaty? Francis is. I'm sure many of you are as well. My friend Ken is. Okay? This is one of the hardest won victories, the Ottawa Treaty banning landmines, and also a source of pride for Canada, for humanitarian disarmament. And now, and much like international humanitarian law, that was one of the situations where the international community realized there may be some military advantages, but it's so indiscriminate that even in times of armed conflict, you don't go there. But guess what? We're going there. And there's a certain flexibility to norms that we thought should be more rigid and should have more persistence in time. We're witnessing, as well, the militarization of public debate. The militarization of public debate. In some of the thorniest issues, peace and security issues today, if you come to the table proposing peace, proposing diplomacy, proposing a negotiated settlement, you are holding a fringe position. You are the outlier, the odd one out. The norm is militarization. The norm has become further military spending, further weapons, more weaponry, more ability to fight, more ability to kill each other. That has become the norm. If you make the case for negotiation, for diplomacy, those things, you have to go the extra mile to make the case that it's even worthwhile to consider that option. Because the option, the default option really has become increasingly to look at these conflicts through a military lens. So the situation is bad, but there is hope. Situation is not only bad, but it's worsening. But I think the takeaway here is that it can be rectified, that we need to reject any sense of inevitability. And the way in which we at Project Ploughshares face this conundrum, this thing, this crumbling of the world, this breaking at the seams, is through our work. You may have seen at the entrance the banner. You may have caught a tagline we use from time to time that is actually quite true and well thought out: research and action for peace. That is what we do. We resist the notion that we need to that we, collective we, civil society, Canadians, need to sit idly as these things are happening. So we try to be propositive. We try to understand reality. We try to communicate that reality to our supporters. We try to be the eyes and ears of supporters when we have access to security conferences, to multilateral processes where norms are being made. We believe in the power of set norms to shape behavior, to delineate the acceptable from the unacceptable. But we do not give up hope. We continue working with steadfast commitment, and we will continue to do so. So that is the context we find ourselves in, and one new-ish element is the electoral results in the United States. And this will very likely, or almost certainly, have security implications, not just in the United States, but in Canada and around the world. So, with the insight of my fabulous colleagues, we're going to go deeper into that question in just a minute. So, thank you.
Thank you, Cesar. Before I get to the first introduction here, I was thinking when we were planning this event and the subject, the question of we are in Canada, we are going to have our own electoral issues coming up on the federal level soon enough, and this is a U.S. election that we're talking about. And I was thinking of Trudeau the Elder. And his famous quote from the 1960s when he was speaking to Richard Nixon. And if some of you may not be familiar, some of you may be quite young here, but he said, "Living next to you is in some ways like sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly and even-tempered is the beast, if I can call it that, one is affected by every twitch and grunt." So I thought that was kind of extraordinarily fitting right now. And with that, my first introduction will be of Kelsey Gallagher, sitting right beside me. Kelsey is a senior researcher, and his work focuses on the arms trade. So, Kelsey, maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of how you see the impact of Trump and his policies, and as much as we can speculate at this point.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks everyone for coming. For leaving the house, we really appreciate it, and it's nice to have everyone here in person. So as Cesar said, I think the ramifications of a second Trump presidency are going to be pretty profound, and I don't think that we can know them all yet unless someone has a crystal ball. So bringing it back so at Ploughshares, I do work on conventional arms. That's my day-to-day work. And I think, so it's no surprise that Trump is a very transactional person, both in his kind of, past in business and in his personal life, but also in terms of politics. So we can see this with some of his cabinet picks, like literally in the past few days, all being hardcore Trump people. And when we look at the arms trade, this kind of dovetails nice, or maybe not so nice for this crowd, but the arms trade itself, right? We're told by government, we're told by industry that the production and trade of weapons is beneficial for security, it's good for jobs, etc. Both of these are problematic arguments on their own rights. But really, when you look at how the international arms trade works, it's deeply transactional, right? So conventional weapons are used as a foreign policy tool. They're used both as a carrot and a stick. If you want a country to do something or not do something, you can either send weapons or throttle those arms sales. And this is certainly something that we saw during the first Trump administration. So I would assume we would see something similar. In terms of where things are going to go from here. So the actual value of American, and just to note, if there's any newbies in the room, the U.S. is essentially the Michael Phelps of the international arms trade. They are the best at it. They sell the most weapons, they produce the most weapons. But some of you might be surprised to learn that the actual value of Trump's arms sales were not so much greater than his predecessor, at least in the last part, or the second, the latter 4 years of Obama's presidency. Marginally larger, but not that much larger. Under the Biden administration, we've seen a huge jump, and that is primarily due to the war in Ukraine. So we've seen, even from Canada, but particularly from the U.S., huge volumes of weapons going to Ukraine and in the defense of Ukraine. And it's also no secret that Trump and some of his cabinet have said that they're going to slash this level of support. Some have said they're going to bring it to zero. I think it might be kind of crazy if it goes down to zero. I don't see that happening. I also think the arms industry is probably already lobbying against that. But in terms of values, I think that what we will see is probably a reduction in total arms sales, but arms sales going towards dodgier regimes. This is not new for American policy. Certainly Biden hasn't followed existing American export control policy, but we did see the first Trump administration kind of free up arms sales to some really sordid regimes, including those in the Gulf. So that's some of what we can expect. I think a reduction in arms sales to where they're going now, an increase in arms sales to other places. Now, and just to add to that, Biden has introduced some relatively progressive arms control policies. These are some guardrails that are based on human rights considerations. Biden introduced, it's called the Conventional Arms Trade Policy, or the CAP policy. And this policy essentially mirrors what's required under the Arms Trade Treaty, which is a humanitarian disarmament treaty that Trump kind of famously unsigned. We can expect Trump to probably rip up that policy. This is something he did in his first administration. But what does this mean for Canada, coming back to us sleeping with the elephant, so to say? The U.S. and any of you who's read some of my work, you would know the U.S. Is the largest consumer of Canadian weapons in any given year, and where this is a real concern from a Trump, looking at a second Trump presidency, is those weapons don't actually stay in the U.S. Many of those weapons go on to third parties, including countries like Israel, including countries that Canada doesn't actually arm at all, countries like Pakistan. And this is likely to increase when the guardrails that are in place in the States are removed. So from our perspective, that's something that we're going to be watching very closely. But yeah, I'll leave it there, and happy to chat more.
Okay, thank you, Kelsey. Branka Marian is also a senior researcher, and her work focuses on emerging technologies. So Branka, can you speak to that area a bit?
Yeah, thanks, Daz. And as Kelsey was talking, I was thinking, oh my God, on emerging technologies, what faces us is going to be both fascinating and probably, I would say, worrisome across the board. But I'm going to identify 3 key trends for you. First, we're going to see an even more permissible regulatory environment for Silicon Valley and big American tech. I think you see, I don't know where the relationship between Musk and Trump will go, these are not very stable personalities, but I think what's been interesting to see there is this push for, greater tech investment and utilizing AI in all its forms and capacities for American leadership. And then relatedly, the second point is that we are going to see some walking back of policies like the National Security Memorandum on AI recently released, right, talking about responsible uses of AI. And then thirdly, on the international stage, and something that's going to impact Canada, the United States has this political declaration on responsible military AI and autonomy. It's a voluntary measures, non-binding agreement. But it started a dialogue among countries, and Canada's co-chairing a working group on accountability and transparency with Portugal as part of this declaration, particularly trying to understand what is appropriate care. So when you say, okay, the government's using AI for this function in the military, they're exercising appropriate care. What does that mean? Is there a level of human control? Is this, loitering munition able to engage targets on its own? Is it, being overseen by a human? Those kinds of questions, are very technical maybe, and maybe a little bit boring to people who are not in policy, but have been critical really to trying to move that discussion forward. I think that leadership that we've seen from the United States on responsible military AI, which has always been, well suited to their interests, that we're going to see also a walking back up. And that's concerning because of a broader geopolitical trend globally on artificial intelligence, which is of no surprise to any of you who have seen any newscasts on this. AI has become central in the geopolitical competition between the United States and China. So you can expect more, tariffs and, obstacles that the United States will try to put on China, whether it's gaining access to sophisticated semiconductors, whether it's gaining access to certain other technologies and know-how. But the centrality of this technology in the geopolitical sphere is going to be something that under this administration will make it really hard to get international agreements around, precisely because there's this degree of transactionalism, and because of the great sort of faith that's being put into these technologies to provide the United States with a competitive edge. So it's going to be really difficult in the multilateral forums that we follow to see actual progress on regulations. Not to say that we've seen a lot of progress. I've been at Ploughshares 10 years, following the issues on autonomous weapons for 10 years. It's not that we don't know the issues. It's not that we can't work out the legal, the technical aspects of it. Sometimes, and I'm sorry someone's a lawyer in the room, sometimes the lawyers are like, well, if we can just figure out the language. We can figure out the language, no problem. We've had these discussions at the United Nations for 10 years now. The problem is political will. And the United States, so far, has provided a bit of a backing for this sort of sense of, well, we can deploy these technologies responsibly. Under this administration, I think that whole sense of we can deploy this technology responsibly will be a lot more challenging, because there's a great deal of economic interest at stake. So this sort of wish that we have and that other organizations around the world have about putting regulations in place, putting constraints, putting guardrails, right? We don't want to deploy AI in all cases, right? And when we do deploy it, we want to know who is accountable, who has examined this technology, who has been trained on it, who's verifying that this is working. I could go on and on to tell you, but just one example. I mean, we have seen AI decision support systems used in places like Gaza. So now we've seen more autonomy in weapon systems. Now we're seeing these systems recommend targets. We're seeing them deployed in social welfare. So for example, in the Netherlands, an algorithm essentially was used to determine social benefits. And what the decision it sort of made was that if you weren't from the Netherlands, or you weren't born in the Netherlands, you were, you're more likely to, to be sort of receiving benefits illegally or something, and then all of these people did not get their benefits in time. And it turned out, once the algorithm was examined, that the factor it had looked at was whether you were born in the Netherlands or not. And so AI technology is going to improve. It's going to become much more sophisticated than it is. There's a lot of funding and a lot of money being dedicated to that. But I think we need clear lines where we say, we don't want to see, these uses applied. We don't want to see AI recommending targets. And by the way, in Gaza, it's 20 seconds to make a decision whether this target is accurate or not. And oftentimes it's just to confirm that it's a male. And we'll see this in other contexts as well. It's, what we're seeing now with AI being deployed around the world, really, and by militaries and testing, we're in the early days, and there's a lot of hype and a lot of belief in this technology. And what worries me personally with this administration is that there isn't going to be that sense of reflection of what are ethical uses, that those questions are going to be put on the back burner even more. And I think that's an enormous challenge that Canada will have to navigate, because we're trying to lead on responsible AI more broadly, and trying to work with our allies and like-minded states on the responsible military AI. How we do that with this new administration is something that is not only worrying me, but I think people in Ottawa as well, whose job it is to do that. So it's going to be a very challenging environment. I know Cesar wants us to be hopeful. I haven't been very good lately. Someone said that I present a bleak view of the world, and I apologize for that. But I think being very realistic about the challenges helps us then inform the kinds of responses we come up with as well.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you. And you've heard from Caesar a little bit, but I'm going to ask if you can speak more specifically to one of your work areas, nuclear weapons.
Thank you, Tad. So, yeah, the impact of the Trump administration on nuclear disarmament efforts. First, to acknowledge that a lot of this is by definition speculative, about what may or may not happen. Second, to acknowledge that speaking with, even looking back with some degree of certainty about the Trump policy on this or that presupposes a certain degree of internal policy coherence, which is not always there. So there's also a lot of haphazard, impulsive decisions that not necessarily fit in together and internal contradictions. And the third caveat is that it's very easy, and with good reason, to assume that things on every front will worsen with Trump, and that's probably a good assumption. But just to in the interest of upon which the jobs or the electoral fortunes of senators and representatives depend directly in at least 23 states and indirectly in all 50 states related to the nuclear weapons infrastructure. And beyond, beyond these economic reality, just the policies, doctrines, and actions of the United States at key multilateral forums related to nuclear disarmament just leave a lot to be desired, because this very gap that I'm referring to between the rhetoric and the practice is just too obvious to deny. And I think more and more states and civil society experts, etc., see through it, and they're like, how can you even say that but you're doing the opposite? I mean, it's this very perplexing situation. When it comes to what we consider to be the gravest nuclear threat today, Ukraine, there's a great paradox there, and it is that and I was having this very difficult conversation with colleagues recently, if Trump manages to end the conflict in Ukraine quicker than Biden would, and therefore decrease the increasing risk that nuclear weapons might be used, I'd be among those recognizing that as a win, not as and who knows what would drive Trump in that scenario. I'm not one to praise Trump in any other scenario. I'm not doing that now. But just to say that such paradoxical situations are a possibility. There's such a thing that someone as misguided and self-interested as Trump could potentially have, for the wrong reasons, policy prescriptions that are less conducive to conflict or bring us, a little bit farther from nuclear weapons risk for the wrong reasons. America first, America isolationism, or this notion that we should not be the Europe's police guard, and they should pay for their own defense. For whatever reason, however misguided, the actual policy prescription could be more conducive to ending the Ukraine conflict. For example, I'm not sure it's going to be that way, but it's just in the interest of all possibilities, laying out all possibilities. That's certainly one possibility that could happen. Interestingly, in the last month of the Biden administration, I mentioned at the beginning, they're redoubling efforts. They're sending anti-personnel mines to Ukraine, and then 2 days before they announced that, which was 2 days ago, they authorized the use of U.S. long-range missiles deep within Russian territory, and many analysts are wondering to what end. But most agree this carries with it great risks and a great gamble. So we'll see what happens there. One of the key issues in nuclear disarmament has to do with the pursuit of a zone free of nuclear weapons in the Middle East. And this is the type of issue that is so high stakes that it's really, in some cases, a dichotomy between diplomatic engagement or the possibility of military force. I mean, it's that hot, the pursuit of Middle East. And for once, there was a great diplomatic win. Not for once, but a rare diplomatic win in the form of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, or Iran nuclear deal. The bargain was very simple. We gotta keep Iran away from producing a bomb, a goal I wholeheartedly endorse, and in exchange for sanctions relief, because they don't want to be sanctioned and they're struggling and they need their economy reactivated. So that was the bargain. But were we going to trust Iran's word, that they were complying with their commitments moving away from the bomb? No. We had tasked the International Atomic Energy Agency to do so, to verify that Iran was complying. The long and the short of the story is that the IAEA was fully certifying that Iran was complying with every term of the JCPOA, every single term. So in theory, the conditions were there for this diplomatic victory to unfold diplomatically, and stave away the possibility of resolving through other means, including military confrontation. But then Trump, or under the Trump presidency, the United States unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal and sent it unraveling. And today it's in its death throes, and Iran has actually increased the percentage of uranium that it is enriching, etc. And it's anybody's guess if we can ever go back to the terms of the JCPOA. But the reality was that the Trump administration, not as an evidence-based decision, but as a politically influenced sort of impulsive decision, sent this very important deal unraveling. And there's a broader reflection there that relates to the erosion of the U.S. as a credible leader in arms control and disarmament that may continue under Donald Trump. So I will leave it there, just in the interest of time, and we're happy to entertain some questions.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Somebody have a hand up? Yes.
Yes.
Yep, I think Adam's coming.
So I think wonderful Adam is going to bring around.
He'll bring the mic to
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Adam.
You can just turn it on, Adam.
Hello. I have a question. This popped into my head when Kelsey, you were first talking. I'm wondering what you think of potentially leveraging highly capitalistic minds in leadership and trying to make an argument for decreasing investment in war and arms by like crunching mad numbers and trying to demonstrate the cost, or like if people already have tried to do that or do that regularly, like what is the cost benefit of war? Are we thinking about it expansively enough, or is there potentially an argument to be made about, well, is this actually just costing us way more resources, and can we leverage like really greedy people's minds and say, or do you maybe want to be more financially intelligent?
Thanks, Ben. Quite a philosophically deep question. Ben he used to work for Ploughshares, by the way. So thanks so much for coming, Betty. So I don't think I can answer all of that question. What I will start by saying is that at least from a production standpoint, I mean, and I started off by saying, you know, we're commonly told that the production and export of weapons is financially a good thing, right? It's good for jobs, and you know, some of these weapons are sold by, at least in the case of Canada, crown corporations. But the actual production of weapons typically is very capital intensive. You don't see a lot of kind of returns. Certainly the arms industry, I would say more than other segments of the economy, is susceptible to kind of wild swings. Excuse me, there's some people in the room that have written very eloquently about this, Ken, you know, including Mr. Regier, Ernie Regier. One of the most kind of cost ineffective parts about arms production and arms export in particular is the fact that companies and therefore countries will become export dependent. And this leads typically into very bad things. So some of you would probably be well aware that Canada, the second biggest consumer of Canadian weapons, is Saudi Arabia, a country with one of the worst human rights records in the world. It's not even controversial to say. And what we sell to the Saudis is light armored vehicles. That actually started because a company called General Dynamics, it was a different company at the time, was selling a lot of these LAVs to the US Army, and that contract came to an end. And so now the company, which was also receiving huge sums of money from the Canadian federal government, had to say, well, these people are going to go out of work. We're not going to be benefiting, in scare quotes, from these arms, from the production of these weapons if we can't find another deal, so we have to find another buyer. So this led GD, with the help from the Canadian federal government, to Riyadh. This was back in 1991, and now we've been selling weapons to the Saudis ever since. So from a human rights perspective, it's not a good thing. From a financial perspective, and I'm not an economist, but it's, generally if you read about the structure of the arms trade, it's very capital intensive. It also requires a lot of finances from governments that are willing to prop up these companies. In a lot of countries, these companies are actually state-run. In Canada, they're not state-run, but many of the major contracts, including our contracts to the Saudis, are actually facilitated through crown corporations and backed up with taxpayer dollars. So it's a big question. I didn't want to go this far down the rabbit hole. But if someone, to borrow your term, someone really capitalistic, if you're going to say arms production isn't a good thing, I would sell it to them by saying, well, do you think taxpayer dollars should be going towards propping up companies that facilitate human rights abuses? Do you think there should be whole segments of crown corporations that just take public funds to prop up these companies? If they're really doing well, then let the market decide. Wouldn't be what I would say, but that's maybe how you'd win that argument.
Hi, it's a question for Cesar about nuclear weapons, but also nuclear damage. Like, I look at what's happening in Ukraine, and would nuclear warfare be considered if you damage nuclear plants that then, create a disaster in a country? Is that part of nuclear war as well?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great question. No, damage to nuclear plants is a great, great concern, especially including the context of Ukraine, and many of you will have heard of Zaporizhia and the need for ensuring security. And in fact, the situation in Zaporizhia was the key reason that the 2022, a couple of years ago, the review conference of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the big meeting of the main treaty dealing with nuclear weapons, failed, or it was unable to agree on an outcome document for disagreements over Zaporizhia. It would not be considered nuclear war. I mean, it would be catastrophic, or it could be catastrophic, and that would be a matter of nuclear safety and security, which is important in its own right. In the peace movement or in the disarmament movement, this is, just an add-on. Organizations and groups and individuals have made the choice of whether or not to tackle just the weapons or to tackle the weapons and the energy, and both choices are respectable. But from our perspective, we understand them as related but separate issues that require different policy prescriptions, really, to advance them. Thanks.
Thanks. I feel compelled to be somewhat contrarian about the perspective on what's going on within the Republican Party and the American government. I want to emphasize that my contrarianness comes from the left. I've been on the left since any Vietnam War stuff here on campus 56 years ago.
Could you introduce yourself? Sorry.
Closer?
Could you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh.
Just-
I'm Steve Isma. I grew up here. I've been here all my life. And I've worked in publishing in this area virtually all my adult life. And I want to be contrarian in the sense of being pragmatically hopeful about what's going on within the American government right now. Unfortunately, most of my colleagues on the left are so freaked out by Trump, so hateful of Trump, that they, first of all, can't understand the propaganda that's been used against Trump, which is a lot of lies. Trump is a liar himself, but that doesn't mean that the people who criticize him aren't lying as well. And because of their fear, the kind of oppositional politics that people have gotten into, binary politics, polarized politics, almost as if we're playing a hockey game with politics. Trump is so bad, everybody on his
This is a bit of an oversimplification, but the grand bargain is understood to be the 5 states that had nuclear weapons would give them up. The great majority of the international community that did not made a commitment not to get them, and they all said we can all use nuclear energy for peaceful uses. But you fast forward to today, and not only have the 5 states that had nuclear weapons not giving them up, now there are 9 that have nuclear weapons. They are investing all of them heavily, billions of dollars in the modernization, upgrading of their nuclear arsenals, and they're resisting calls from the rest of the international community to live up to the commitment they made back in 1970 to disarm. So civil society with a bunch of progressive states, critically under the banner Civil Society of ICANN, recently supported the negotiation of a newer treaty, which was adopted in 2017 by the United Nations. And basically, this was a result of the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, of this frustration that the grand bargain from 1970 was not being honored. It was like they were making a mockery of it. You know, they're not only not disarming, but they're moving in the opposite direction. And this newer treaty basically made it very clear that nuclear weapons, even their possession, is illegal. But unfortunately, the states, many of the states without whose support, you know, the treaty won't be as effective as it's promised, remain, you know, opponents of that treaty. If that makes sense. But it's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for a couple of more questions. 2 more questions, yeah? There and there? Okay.
Thank you, all of you. Caesar, I think it was you that was saying that on the people who are suggesting peace building are on the fringes. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, so those of us that are involved in peace building, conflict resolution, to us that should be the first thing that's happening, especially everything we've been through in history, what we know, what research shows, what's better for the people, what's better financially, taking all of that into consideration. Why is that the last thing being considered, and what can the common person do to encourage that to be the first thing that's considered, whether locally or internationally?
Thank you. I mean, that's a tough question, and I'm not sure I'm going to have the whole answer. But part of it starts with some of the work you're doing. You know, really encouraging from a young age. You know, to be well informed and really, especially students. I think of students when I say this, to be courageous. You know, to express their views. I'll give you a couple of examples. Denouncing the atrocities in Gaza today, and this is no secret, you run the risk of being called anti-Semitic, you know? Pointing out the need for a negotiated settlement in Ukraine and its inevitability, you run the risk of being told that you're playing into Putin's hands, you know, or that you're being an apologist for Russia, for Russia's aggression, which is, you know, nothing I'm defending. But despite those risks, you need to raise these points. You know, a conversation about Gaza where the atrocities do not come up, a conversation about Ukraine where nobody says this will end in a settlement, because otherwise you risk nuclear warfare. You need to put that on the table, even if they look at you funny, even if they accuse you of things you are not. Even, you know, we laughed it off. I had an op-ed in the Globe and Mail a while ago, stating this conflict, it will end in a negotiation, and the epithets, and you know, in the comment section, like pinko and communist and things of the sort, and I'm like, no, and to, you know, but and not to praise myself at all, but I do think that having the clarity to raise the issues that need to be raised. I feel that the space for nuanced debate is closing. They say, you know, the first casualty of war is truth. Well, the second is nuance, I would say, you know, and it's black or white. And I've attended, you know, several events and conferences with high brass, military and political, you know, and I'm honestly amazed at the lack of sophistication. It's a very black and white view of the world, and this good guys, bad guys mentality when, okay, everyone could improve their behaviors a little bit, etc. But I do see this with great concern, the closing of nuanced space. The way we deal with it at Project Ploughshares, I'll give you a statement, when the conflict first broke out in Gaza, and we put out a statement, you know, and everyone was on, shaky ground because anything to do with Israel and Gaza, you know, it's risky, it's a minefield, everybody knows that, and we're like, we have to speak out. And the way we understand this whole conundrum is like, if we're backed by facts, be fearless. You know, if we have the facts, if we're comfortable about everyone we're saying, be fearless. It doesn't matter what they throw at you. It doesn't matter, you know, the opposition or the mischaracterizations of our positions. Go at it, because we're backed by, you know, credible evidence and facts, which is, the source of our work.
I also want to add, I mean, one of the things that's going to happen as a result of this administration is there is going to be increased pressure on us to increase our defense spending, you know, the 2% GDP. And so I think that sort of need for diplomacy, for example, diplomacy is incredibly underfunded in Canada, right? And you know, those kinds of positions or those calls or that advocacy for more investment in diplomacy. For, you know, before coming here, I was at a discussion of like, Canada needs tech talent. How do we attract tech talent? You know, we have to make that call that, you know, this kind of investment in defense, if it doesn't make sense for Canada, like, we shouldn't be doing it just because we're being pressured, you know, to reach this. You know, we say this number, you know, we describe it as arbitrary, really. There are a lot of other sort of areas, I think all of us have experienced, whether it's healthcare or public education, that, you know, in Canada that requires funding. And so we need to draw attention to that. What are we drawing our resources to, and how is it supporting or impacting our population? And just to say that is, you know, that can become a fringe position, but it's not acceptable that it is, because I mean, our whole economic future as a country depends on ensuring that we're investing in our youth, that we're investing in, you know, our tech talent, that we're investing in education. And, you know, when we're investing in defense, we're not investing in those things because we have to make hard choices with budgets, right? So I think it's really important to have those calls as well, and to speak back. You know, people might not feel like they have a lot to say on foreign policy at times, but we all live in this society. We go to the ER and wait 6 hours, and, you know, so we have to bring that up and say, you know, what is being done, I think, and how are we bettering our education system or the future of our country? I think those questions have to come to the forefront more and more.
Yeah, I would just reiterate what Cesar and Brock are saying about this kind of this sacrifice of truth and trusting yourself, like that question about nuclear weapons and treaties, and you thought it was an elementary question, and it struck me as an extremely important question, because you were responding just with a basic sense of right and wrong, that, you know, the hypocrisy, right? The hypocrisy of the whole, you know, the nuclear armed states telling other states that, well, you can't have them, you know, and that's an important, it's an important question, and it's important to consider that. And you don't have to have, you know, the technical training necessarily that we do, but I think it's important to trust yourself and your response to things as a human being, and then organizations like Ploughshares, where we have for, you know, half a cent, 50 years, right? I mean, we've have this credibility that has been built, that in this era of information saturation and misinformation, to be able to, you know, turn to these guys, or, you know, and understand that we are coming from a place of facts and reason and fairness, and I think that's, you know, I think that's how you center peace, just in your daily interactions, I would say. More question? You got a question back there?
Yeah, just a quick one. Just before we began, Kelsey had mentioned something about some recent work that involved labeling nuclear weapons as illegal. Can you speak about that a little?
Oh no, we're having a conversation before, yeah. So yeah, I think what I was referring to, and Cesar would be the one to speak to this, but this is the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or the Nuke Ban Treaty.
Yeah.
Give it 101, yeah.
Sure. No, I mean, states with nuclear weapons have gotten away with this ambiguity about what exactly has been made illegal under the NPT. And what the TPNW does is it makes it crystal clear that the possession itself of nuclear weapons is illegal. Not just the detonation, but the very possession. And it's perhaps not surprising that it's being opposed by nuclear weapon states because, you know, they would be in an immediate state of illegality by the very possession. But I just want to say why it makes sense that the possession as well is prohibited. Because nuclear weapons don't need to be detonated to be used. Have they been detonated in the context of the Ukraine conflict? No. Could we argue that they haven't been used? No, of course they've been used. They've shaped behavior. They've shaped behavior of Ukraine. They've shaped the response from NATO. They shaped the decisions about where to place troops. NATO officially says they will not be deterred. They have been deterred. That's what nuclear weapons do. And when it comes to risk of nuclear escalation and the real possibility that they might be used, questions of right or wrong become a little bit secondary. Oh, he or she or that party is to blame. He or she started it. You know, that was unprovoked. It wasn't unprovoked. You know, at that point, you need to think about risk reduction, and we're actually moving away from the brink. But the question is that TPNW made it very clear. But states, including Canada, we have been for years trying to get Canada to even show up at meetings of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. No prior commitments. They don't have to pledge anything about actions or plans for nuclear disarmament. We're begging, you know, for lack of a better word, can you like show up and listen? Not as a state party, as an observer. Just show up and listen, and you can let everybody know that you're there as an observer. And Canada has said, well, we're a member of NATO and we have certain commitments that are not compatible with the treaty. Guess what? Germany is a member of NATO. They've shown up to TPNW meetings. Norway is a member of NATO. They've shown up to TPNW meetings. So that argument fell through. You're like, okay, it is possible to be a member of NATO and show up in good faith to engage with the, you know, with a view to finding a solution to a nuclear problem. We're hoping the third meeting is happening early next year, and we're still hopeful that we'll see Canada there for the first time.
Okay, thank you, everyone. If you have questions still, you know, there's going to be time to chat, and just please come up and speak to anyone. We'd be happy to talk to you. But before we end this sort of formal panel part of the evening, I'd like to ask Ernie Regier, our Ploughshares founder, to come up and say a few words. Sure. Sit or stand? Would you like to sit or stand? What would you like? Yeah, okay.
Thanks. I'm another talk is not what you had in mind. And furthermore, what I was going to say, and that is kind of make the point that what we have in Ploughshares is a solid organization that is in fact focused on the key crises that face the planet at the moment. But of course the panel has done that much more effectively and eloquently than I am now. But just think about it for a minute. There's the nuclear crisis. There's the crisis of ongoing wars and the supply of arms to those wars. There is the increasing danger of the outer space being weaponized. Branka has talked about the emerging technologies and AI and the acute dangers there. There's also the danger of climate change and the security implications of that. All of that, which Ploughshares has paid some attention to. I mean, all of those are issues that Ploughshares is addressing, and they're modest people, and they didn't say this, but you should know that when you go to national gatherings in Canada on any one of these questions, it's the Ploughshares are represented, the Forest Circle research of the Ploughshares are really among the top experienced and knowledgeable people in each of those spheres of discussion. So we've got a very strong resource here. It's knowledge-based. It does its advocacy work on the basis of deep understanding and facts about the issues that we are addressed. They do it with important and ongoing funding from right across the country. It wouldn't. No one here would say it's abundant funding, but it's core funding, and it's also true that these are particularly difficult times to raise funds. Nancy and I have been in this business for a long time, and she knows better than I do about the ups and downs of fundraising. And there are ups and downs, and I think we're in a sort of a down cycle now. It's makes me emotional because it's we've on getting old and sort of early senility or something, but
nothing of the sort.
But we've got an important resource that's worth preserving, and there are people right across the country who help to preserve this, who preserve it, who depend on it, and I know many of you are doing the basic work of not only being concerned about the issues, but also providing money in support of the work that these people do. So it's kind of that deep appreciation that I wanted to express. Thanks.
Thank you, Ernie. We wouldn't be here without Ernie, so. And a shout out to Jessica West. She's also a senior researcher, and for personal reasons, she was not able to participate, but yeah. So yeah, with that, thank you again, everyone, for being here, and please stay and chat and have some beverages, and there might still be some food left. And
Can I say one more word?
Yeah, go ahead. Of course.
No, just to hello. Just to once again reiterate the expressions of gratitude and Taz said, and including to Ernie, that I think Ernie knows this. I can't start talking about the impact of Ernie because then I'll get emotional. So nobody wants to see that for sure. But yeah, no, we really are grateful, and it's not a something you say, like oh, we exist thanks to your support. Like it is the literal truth. We exist thanks to the support of people who care about peace, and the way I understand it often is that it's people that care about these issues just as much as we do, but perhaps people don't have the time or the means or the expertise or the wherewithal or the ability to be in Ottawa or New York or wherever they actually may be, and then you entrust us with that, going out there sort of in your name. There's something both daunting and slightly presumptuous, admittedly, about seeing it that way, but we feel that we are entrusted, with the mandate, and yeah, we're very grateful, and we will continue to fulfill it. So, thank you.